Now, as you all know, skeptics annoy us because they challenge the assumptions that we hold without question. The skeptics might ask the question of us, so you believe in an empty tomb, but so what? Well, the answer to the skeptics today comes from the voices that are heard and the voices that are recognized. Abby read in that very long, torturous first reading a man named Saul riding through the desert with an arrest warrant. In a way, we don't quite understand how he was able to con himself to get that. But his intention in his life is that he's going to put an end to this Christian movement, and he thinks he knows how to do it, and he has the plan. And if I understood you correctly, when you read, what did you say to us? He heard a voice that called him out by name and said, "Why are you bothering me?" Not the community of people following. Why are you bothering me? His life changes. And Lily reads that the one who we call John the Divine is given this religious experience, an experience of what life after death may be like. Her first words out of your mouth, if I remember correctly, if I paid attention to you, I heard a voice that said to me, heard a voice. A group of disciples who have given up on the last 3 years of their life have decided there's nothing worth to do anymore except go back to work. And a part of me understands that because if you've taken 3 years off from your job, I suppose you'd have to get back to work eventually and bring something home. And they go out fishing, and we are told one of them recognizes a voice that called out to them from the shore. This is a day about recognizing voices that call us. And understanding that the empty tomb by itself, as powerful as a symbol as that is meaningless. It doesn't change anything. It didn't change their lives. I'm sure the Lord is a bit frustrated with the fact that whatever they experienced in terms of that Easter morning didn't do anything for them or to them. They're always one step behind. They've encountered the risen Lord. Certain members of their group, unfortunately in that culture, because they were women, they were automatically dismissed as hysterical. And I'm not saying that to be nasty or just to be outrageous. That's the mindset. But when they themselves encountered the risen Lord, nothing changed. Nothing happened. Go back fishing because, well, if he's not going to be with Jesus all the time, I guess we're laid off. And you never get laid off from being a Christian. You never get laid off from the mission of listening to the voice that calls you to mission and ministry. So they're told, look, this is what you got to do. Number one, pay attention to me. Number two, you guys are the experts, but why don't you do it this way? You know how you normally would go fish? Fish the way you're not supposed to. Do it the wrong way. Change. It would be kind of like me telling Deichler how to do his job. Okay? I know you would appreciate that. Okay. Or telling you, Rochelle, how to do your job. You know? It's the same thing. He gives them an impetus and he forces them to listen, to see things differently and do things differently. And forces them to also understand not a vision, not a hallucination, something beyond a spiritual experience, a real body bearing the marks of what he went through in terms of his own dying. And he says to them, look, you got to listen. I'm calling you for something. You have to listen. And in the midst of that, we have Peter, who I've often told you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. There is one in the 12 I identify with, one I totally get and understand. It's Peter, okay? Because he's so flawed. He's enthusiastic, but he tends to say the wrong thing at the worst possible time. So get the scene, all right? Number one, they're out there fishing. He recognizes Christ. He recognizes the risen one. And he's going to jump right in and go grab him. And somebody actually has to go over and say, would you put some clothes on first, dude? Okay. Which makes me want to understand, what are you doing out there fishing without any clothes? But that's a sermon for another time. I'm not even going to go there. But in his enthusiasm, he comes, he confronts Christ, he rejoices over the fact that this is not about a person's ethical teaching system. This is about a relationship with one who has conquered death. It's a difference between being a Christian and being a member of any other religious tradition. Because we believe the person with whom we identify whom we believe makes us whole, is a person who still lives. So Peter acknowledges this, and then Jesus said, and Peter's got to listen. He says, you, step into my office. We have something to talk about. I've been told, and you probably already, if I've mentioned this in a sermon before, I apologize, but it always struck me when I heard it in class once. The question, Simon, do you love me more than these? You can ask that question 3 different ways. And depending upon what you emphasize, you're asking 3 different questions. All of which are pointed, all of which are important. Simon, do you love me more than these? What about you? Don't worry about that. What about you? Do you love me more than these? Yeah, you believe and you trust, but do you love me? The commitment that love is. Love is a very important word to me today. I will share this with you, and this is not an ecumenical slam, but I was just so struck yesterday. Yesterday I did one of the duties that comes with being the boss, in a sense. Julianne's daughter received First Communion at St. Mary's in Katona. So I just went to the service just to show support. And I was struck by, and I guess because I've been part of the Episcopal tradition now long enough, I have lived through now the fact that they have changed the English translation to their liturgy. It's not the English translation that I learned. I know they did that 4 years ago. I remember reading the documents because I have no life. I read everything, right? And now there's a different English translation to the Eucharistic service. Okay? Some say it's better, some say it's worse. I'm not going to get involved in that. But I was absolutely struck by the fact that in that liturgy, I never once heard the word love. It was always translated charity. Always, in every possible place where it could. Now, charity is love, correct? It's the same thing, right? Or is it? All right. And I understand why they said charity. It's a more literal translation. Caritas transliterates into charity. Charity is love, but love is something more. Simon, son of John, do you love me? And do you love me? And what are you willing to give up? The question also posed, do you love me more than these? And obviously we're meant to understand that, obviously, Jesus is pointing to something. But what was he pointing to? We don't know from the text. Was he pointing to the boat and the net and the fish and the tackle and all the stuff that made up his ordinary life? And he's saying, are you in love with me enough that you're willing to give up your relatively comfortable life, your relatively safe life, and take the consequences of following me? Or was he pointing to the others in the group, the others who were standing there having breakfast? And is he saying to them, do you love me more than these guys? Remember the night before I was arrested and I said one of you is going to betray me, and you got up and said, well, look, if everyone else runs away, I'll stand by you. And of course he didn't. Was this payback? Or was this a chance for redemption? Do you love me more than they do? Are you willing to love me to the point that you'll take on the burden, the responsibility, and the joy of what shepherding really is about, leading God's people on their journey and sharing their hopes and their joys and their pains with them? I could ask each of you by name the question the Lord poses to each one of you. Do you love me more than these? Are you willing to hear his voice? Paul had to hear a voice. John the Divine heard a voice. The beloved disciple in the boat recognized the voice. Do you recognize the voice? The Lord asks each of you, do you love me? And then he says, all right, if you do, follow me. No matter what it costs, if you love me, follow me. You listen, and your joy will be complete. Amen. Amen.